And life. Today, new book, self-control. It's kingship and majesty. Man has two creators: his God and himself. His first creator furnishes him the raw material of his life and the laws in conformity with which he can make that life very well. His second creator, himself, has marvelous powers he rarely realizes. It is what a man makes of himself that counts. When a man fails in life, he usually says, I am as God made me. When he succeeds, he proudly proclaims himself a self made man. Man is placed into this world not as a finality but as a possibility. Man's greatest enemy is himself. Man, in his weakness, is the creature of circumstances. Man, in his strength, is the creator of circumstances. Whether he be victim or victor depends largely on himself. Man is never truly great merely for what he is, but ever for what he may become. Until man be truly filled with the knowledge of the majesty of his possibility, until there come to him the glow of realization of his privilege to live the life committed to him. As an individual life for which he is individually responsible, he is merely groping through the years. To see his life as he might make it, man must go up alone into the mountains of spiritual thought as Christ went alone into the garden. Live in the world to get strength to live in the world. He must there breathe the fresh, pure air of recognition of his divine importance as an individual. And with mind purified and tingling with new strength, he must approach the problems of his daily living. Man needs less of the I am a feeble worm of the dust I am in his theology, and more of the conception I am a great human soul with marvelous possibilities as a vital element in his daily working religion. With this broadening, stimulating view of life, he sees how he may attain his kingship through self control. And this self control that is seen in the most spectacular instances in history and in the simplest phases of daily life is precisely the same in kind and in quality, differing only in degree. This control man can attain if he only will. It is but a matter of paying the price. The power of self control is one of the great qualities that differentiates man from the lower animals. He is the only animal capable of a moral struggle or a moral conquest. Every step in the progress of the world has been a new control. It's been escaping from the tyranny of a fact to the understanding and mastery of that fact. For ages, man looked in terror at the lightning flash. Today, he has begun to understand it as electricity, a force he had mastered and made his slave. The million phases of electrical invention are but manifestations of our control over a great force. But the greatest of all control is self-control. At each moment of man's life, he is either a king or a slave. As he surrenders to a wrong appetite, to any human weakness, as he falls prostrate in hopeless subjection to any condition, to any environment, to any failure, he is a slave. As he day by day crushes out human weakness, masters opposing elements within him, and day by day recreates a new self from the sin and folly of his past, then he's a king. Let me read that again. As he day by day crushes out human weakness, masters opposing elements within him, and day by day recreates a new self from the sin and folly of his past, then he is a king. He's a king ruling with wisdom over himself. Alexander conquered the whole world except Alexander, emperor of the earth. He was the servile slave of his own passions. We look with envy upon the possessions of others and wish they were all. What is envy? Irsha. Okay. We look with jealousy upon the possessions of others and wish they were our own. Sometimes we feel this in a vague, dreamy way with no thought of real attainment. As when we wish we had Queen Victoria's crown or Emperor William's self-satisfaction. Sometimes, however, we grow bitter, storm at the wrong distribution of the good things of life, and then relapse into a hopeless, fatalistic acceptance of our condition. We envy the success of others when we should emulate the process by which that success came. What is emulate? Okay. We see the splendid physical development of Samuel, yet we forget that as a babe and child, he was so weak, there was little hope that his life might be spared. We may sometimes envy the power and spiritual strength of a Paul without realizing the weak soul of Tarsus from which he was transformed through his self-control. We shut our eyes to the thousands of instances of world's successes, mental, moral, physical, financial, or spiritual, wherein the great final success came from a beginning far weaker and poorer than our own. Any man may attain self-control if he only will. He must not expect to gain it save by long continued payment of price in small progressive expenditures of energy. Nature is a true believer in the installment plan of relations with the individual. No man is so poor that he cannot begin to pay for what he wants, and every small individual payment that he makes, nature stores and accumulates for him as a reserve fund in his hour of need. The patience man expands in bearing the little trials of his daily life. Nature stores for him as a wondrous reserve in a crisis of life. With nature, the mental, the physical, or the moral energy he expends daily in right doing is all stored for him and transmuted into strength. Nature never accepts a cash payments in full for anything. This would be an injustice to the poor and to the weak. It is only the progressive installment plan nature recognizes. No man can make a habit in a moment or break it in a moment. It's a matter of development, of growth. But at any moment, man may begin to make or begin to break any habit. This view of growth of character should be a mighty stimulus to the man who sincerely desires and determines to live nearer to the limit of his possibilities. Self-control may be developed in precisely the same manner as we tone up a weak muscle by little exercises day by day. Let us each day do as mere exercises of discipline in moral gymnastics. A few acts that are disagreeable to us, the doing of which will help us in instant action in hour of need. The exercises may be very simple, dropping for a time an intensely interesting book and the most thrilling page of the story, jumping out of bed at the first moment of waking, walking home when one is perfectly able to do so, but when that temptation is to take a car, talking to some disagreeable person and trying to make the conversation pleasant. These daily exercises in moral discipline will have a wondrous tonic effect on a man's whole moral nature. The individual can attain self-control in great things only through self-control in little things. He must study himself to discover what is the weak point in his armor, what is the element within him that ever keeps him from his fullest success. This is the characteristic upon which he should begin his exercise in self-control. Is it selfishness, vanity, cowardice, morbidness, temper, laziness, worry, mind wandering, lack of purpose? Whatever form human weakness assumes in the masquerade of life, he must discover. He must then live each day as if his whole existence were telescoped down to the single day before him, with no useless regret for the past, no useless worry for the future. He should live that day as if it were his only day, the only day left for him to assert all the best in him, the only day left for him to conquer all that is worst in him. He should master the weak element within him at each slight manifestation from the moment to moment, from moment to moment. Each moment, then he must be a victory, then be a victory for it or for him. Will he be king or be slave? The answer rests within him. 2. The crimes of the tongue. The second most deadly instrument of destruction is the dynamite gun. The first is the human tongue. The gun merely kills bodies. The tongue kills reputations and oftentimes ruins characters. Each gun works alone. Each loaded tongue has 100 accomplices. The havoc of the gun is visible at once. The full evil of the tongue lives through all the years. Even the eye of omniscience might grow tired in tracing it to its finality. The crimes of the tongue are words of unkindness, of anger, of malice, of envy, of bitterness, of harsh criticism, of gossip, lying, and scandal. Theft and murder are awful crimes, yet, in any single year, the aggregate sorrow, pain, and suffering they cause in a nation is microscopic when compared with the sorrows that come from the crimes of the tongue. Placed in one of the scale pans of justice, the evils resulting from the acts of criminals, and the other, the grief and tears and suffering resulting from the crimes of respectability. And you will start back in amazement. As you see the scale, you thought the hair shoot high in air. At the hands of thief or murderer, few of us suffer, even indirectly. But from the careless tongue of friend, the cruel tongue of enemy, who is free? No human being can live a life so true, so fair, so pure as to be beyond the reach of malice, or immune from the poisonous emanations of envy. What is malice? To wish to hurt other people. Fine. The insidious attacks against one's reputation, the loathsome innuendos, slurs, half-lies by which jealous mediocrity seeks to ruin its superpower. Superiors are like those insect parasites that kill the heart and life of a mighty oak. So cowardly is the method, so stealthy the shooting of the poisoned thorns, so insignificant the separate acts of their seeming, that one is not on guard against them. It is easier to dodge an elephant than a microbe. In London, they have recently formed an anti-scandal league. The members promise to combat in every way in their power the prevalent custom of talking scandal, the terrible and unending consequences of which are not generally estimated. Scandal is one of the crimes of the tongue, but it is only one. Every individual who breathes a word of scandal is an active stakeholder in society for the spread of moral contagion. He is instantly punished by nature for having his mental eyes dimmed to sweetness and purity, and his mind deadened to the sunlight glow of charity. There is developed a wondrous, ingenious perversion of mental vision by which every act of others is explained and interpreted from the lowest possible motives. They become like certain carrion flies that pass lightly over acres of rose gardens to feast on a piece of putrid meat. They have developed a keen scent for the foul matter upon which they feed. There are pillows wet by sobs. There are noble hearts broken in the silence, whence comes no cry of protest. There are gentle, sensitive natures, seared and warped. There are old time friends separated and walking their lonely ways with hope, dead, memory but a pain. There are cruel misunderstandings that make all life look dark. These are but a few of the sorrows that come from the crimes of the tongue. A man may lead a life of honesty and purity, battling bravely for all the holds, the rest, so firm and sure of the rightness of his life that he never thinks for an instant of the diabolic ingenuity that makes evil an evil report where not but good really exists. A few words lightly spoken by the tongue of slander, a significant expression of the eyes, a cruel shrug of the shoulders, with a pursuing parsing of the lips, and then friendly hands grow cold. The accustomed smile is displaced by a snarl, and one stands alone and aloof with a dazed feeling of wonder at the vague, intangible something that has caused it all. For this grace, for scandal, sensational newspapers of today are largely responsible. Each newspaper is not one tongue, but 1,000 or 1,000,000 tongues telling the same false story to as many pairs of listening ears. The vultures of sensationalism sensationalism sent the carcass of immortality afar off. From the uttermost parts of the earth, they collect the sin, disgrace, and folly of humanity and show them bare to the world. They do not even require facts, from morbid memories and fertile imaginations, make even the worst of the world's happenings seem tame when compared with their monstrosities of invention. These stories and the discussions they excite develop in readers a cheap, shrewd power of distortion of the acts of all around them. If a rich man gave a donation to some charity, they say he is doing it to get his name talked about, to help his business. If he gave it anonymously, they say, oh, it's a millionaire who is clever enough to know that refraining from giving his name will pique curiosity. He will see that the public is informed later. If he did not give the charity, they say, oh, he is stingy with his money. Of course, like the rest of the millionaires. To the wild tongue of gossip and slander, virtue is ever deemed but a mask, noble ideas, but a pretense, generosity, and bribe. The man who stands above his fellows must expect to be the target for the envious arrows of their inferiority. It is part of the price he must pay for his advance. One of the most detestable characters in all literature is Lego. Envious of the promotion of Cassio above his head, he hated Othello. His was one of those low natures that become absorbed in sustaining his dignity, talking of preserving his honor, forgetting it has no longer been dead, that even in blaming could not preserve it. Day by day, Lago dropped his poison. Day by day, they suffered resentment and started vengeance, distilled the poison of distrust and suspicion into more powerfully insidious doses. With a mind wonderfully concentrated by the blackness of his purpose, he wove a network of circumstantial evidence around the pure-hearted Desdemona, and then murdered her seriously by the hand of Othello. Her very simplicity, confidence, innocence, and artlessness made this Madonna the easier mark for the diabolic tactics of Lake. Lego still lives. Okay, it is not Lego, I think it's Iago. Iago still lives in the hearts of thousands who have all his despicable meanness without his cleverness. The constant dropping of their lying words of malice and envy, in too many instances, at last won away the noble reputations of their superiors. To sustain ourselves in our own hasty judgments, we sometimes say, as we listen and accept without investigation, the word of these modern Iagos. Well, where there is so much smoke, there must be some fire. Yes, but the fire may be only the fire of malice, the incendiary firing of the reputation of another by the lighted torch of envy, thrown into the innocent facts of a life of superiority. 3. The red tape of duty. Duty is the most overloaded word in the whole vocabulary of life. Duty is the cold, bare anatomy of righteousness. Duty looks at life as a debt to be paid. Love sees life as a debt to be collected. Let me recite that one more time. Duty looks at life as a debt to be paid. Love sees life as a debt to be collected. Duty is ever paying assessments. Love is constantly counting its premiums. Duty is forced like a pump. Love is spontaneous like a fountain. Duty is prescribed and formal. It is part of the red tape of life. It means running on mortal rails. It is good enough as the beginning. It is poor as a finality. The boy who stood on the burning deck and who committed suicide on the technical point of obedience has been held up to the school children of the century as a memorial of faithfulness to duty. The boy was the victim of a blind adherence to the red tape of duty. He was placing the whole responsibility for his act on someone outside himself. He was helplessly waiting for instruction in the hour of emergency, and he should have acted for himself. His act was an empty sacrifice. It was a useless throwing away of a human life. It did no good to the father, to the boy, to the ship, or to the nation. The captain who goes down with his sinking vessel, when he has done everything in his power to save others, and when he can save his own life without dishonor, is the victim of a false sense of duty. He is cruelly forgetful of the loved ones on the shore that he is sacrificing. His death means a spectacular exit from life. The cowardly fear of an investigating committee or a brave man's loyal yet misguided sense of duty. A human life with its wondrous possibilities is too sacred an individual trust to be thus lightly thrown into eternity. They tell us the sublime nobleness of the Roman soldier at Pompeii, whose skeleton was found centuries afterward, embedded in the once molten lava which swept down on the doomed city. He was still standing at one of the gates at his post of duty, still grasping a sword in his crumbling fingers. His was a morbid faithfulness to a discipline from which a great convulsion of nature had released him. An automation would have stood there just as long, just as boldly, just as usually. The man who gives 1 hour of his life to loving, consecrated service to humanity is doing higher, better, truer work in the world than the army of Roman sentinels paying useless tribute to the red tape of duty. There is, in his interpretation of duty, no sympathy with the man who deserts his post when needed, but his deserts to leave a place without help. Abandon. Okay, I see. There is in this interpretation of duty no sympathy with the man who deserts his post when needed. It is but a protest against losing the essence, the realness of true duty in worshipping the mere form. Analyze, if you will, any of the great historic instances of loyalty to duty, and whenever they ring true, you will find the presence of the real element that made the act almost divine. It was duty plus love. It was no more sense of duty that made Grace Darling risk her life in the awful storm of 60 years ago, when she set out in the darkness of night on a raging sea to rescue the survivors of the wreck of the Forfarshire. It was the sense of duty, formed and vivified by a love of humanity. It was a heroic courage of a heart filled with divine pity and sympathy. Duty is a hard, mechanical process for making men do things that love would make easy. Let me say this one more time. Duty is a hard, mechanical process for making men do things that love would make easy. It is a poor understudy to love. It is not a high enough motive with which to inspire humanity. Duty is the body to which love is the soul. Love, in the divine alchemy of life, transmutes all duty into privileges, all responsibilities into joys. The workman who drops his tool at the stroke of 12, as suddenly as if he had been struck by lightning, may be doing his duty, but is doing nothing more. No man has made a great success of his life or a fit preparation for immortality by doing merely his duty. He must do that and more. If he puts love into his work, the more will be easy. The nurse may watch faithfully at the bedside of a sick child as a duty, but to the mother's heart, the care of the little one in the battle against death is never a duty. The golden mantle of love thrown over every act makes the word duty having a jarring sound as if it were the voice of desecration. When a child turns out badly in later years, their parent may say, well, I always did my duty by him. Then it is no wonder the boy turned out wrong. Doing his duty by his son too often implies merely food, lodging, clothes, and education supplied by the father. Why? A public institution would give that. What what the boy needed was most, what the boy needed most was deep draughts of love. He needed to live in an atmosphere of sweet sympathy, counsel, and trust. The parent should ever be an unfailing refuge, a constant resource and inspiration, not a mere lark or hotel or wardrobe or school that furnishes the necessities free. The empty boast of a mere parental duty, one of the dangers of our society. Christianity stands forth as the one religion based on love or duty. Christianity sweeps all duties into one word: love. Love is the only great duty enjoyed by the Christian religion. What duty creeps too laboriously, love reaches in a moment on the wings of a dove. Duty is not lost, condemned, or destroyed in Christianity. It is dignified, purified, and exalted, and all its rough ways are made smooth by love. The supreme instance of generosity in the world's history is not the giving of millions by someone a great name. It is the giving of a mite by a widow whose name does not appear. Behind the widow's mite was no sense of duty, it was the full, free, and perfect gift of a heart filled with love. In the Bible, duty is mentioned but 5 times. Love, hundreds. In the conquest of any weakness in our mental or moral makeup, in the attainment of any strength, in our highest and truest relation to ourselves and to the world, let us ever make love our watchword, not mere duty. If we desire to live a life of truth and honesty, to make our word as strong as our bond, let us not expect to keep ourselves along the narrow line of truth under the constant lash of the whip of duty. Let us begin to love the truth, to fill our mind and life with the strong white light of sincerity and sterling honesty. Let us love the truth so strongly that there will develop within us, without our conscious effort, an ever-present horror of a life. If we desire to do good in the world, let us begin to love humanity, to realize more truly the great dominant note that sounds in every mortal, despite all the discords of life. The great natural bond of unity that makes all men brothers. Then jealousy, lies, envy, unkind words, and cruel misjudging will be eclipsed and lost in the sunshine of love. The greatest triumph of the 19th century is not its marvelous progress in invention, its right in education, its conquest of the dark regions of the world, the spread of a higher mental tone throughout the earth, the wondrous increase in material comfort and wealth. The greatest triumph of this century is not any nor all of this. It is the sweet atmosphere of peace that is covering the nations. It is the growing closer and closer of the people of our earth. Peace is but the breath, the perfume, the life of love. Love is the wondrous angel of life that rolls away all the storms of sorrow and suffering from the pathway of duty. Gentlemen, let us end this self-control book. I covered 3 chapters today. Let us continue with 4 chapters tomorrow. Till then, I must leave. Goodbye.